So to kick off the spookiest season of the year, I made my way to the megaplex for a mid-morning matinee of Malignant, directed by James Wan and starring Annabelle Wallis, George Young, Maddie Hassan, and your sleep paralysis demon. And it was utterly preposterous, but tons of fun, so I guess you could say I'm of two minds on this one. We open on a dark and stormy night in 1993 when the Cliffside Simeon Research Hospital is thrown into chaos as a patient called Gabriel begins brutalizing the staff and interfering with the electricity through some unknown force. As the madman threatens to kill them all, the presiding doctor declares that it's time we cut out the cancer. Cut as well to the present day, and Madison Lake is an expectant mother living in Seattle whose husband isn't too keen on the pregnancy given her history of miscarriage. An argument escalates and he slams her head against the wall, drawing blood. That night, however, someone slams back as a shadowy figure ices her abusive beau before knocking Madison out as well. Madison survives, but the same can't be said for her baby, and the cops have no promising leads on a suspect. Our heroine locks down her home, but it turns out she's not the only one at risk. Suddenly, somehow, she begins experiencing visions of the same figure slaughtering other targets. Their sight now linked, it would seem that the only way to stop the slaying is to figure out who or what Gabriel is, and how he knows Madison from before she even knew herself. It's hard to know where to start in reviewing Malignant, because so much of what makes it both grand and galling relies on the most outrageous parlor scene in recent history. So on the way there, let's just talk about all the individual components at play. First, there's the film's creative pedigree. Wan's been open about the fact that Malignant is his personal ode to giallo cinema, a subset of Italian horror thrillers which rose to prominence in the 1970s. The term is a loose one, but these films are generally considered a predecessor to the American slasher, steeped in suspense, detective work, and mysterious killers, and brought to you by the color red. However, if anything, the film is a throwback to the 2000s, where Wan cut his teeth and plenty of limbs on Saw and Dead Silence. From the faux VHS filter on the studio logos to the gnarly rock score over opening credits splattered with up-close and surgical footage, the film's ultimate medical procedure is a shot of adrenaline to a genre dominated of late by low-key elevated horror. Now, I'll be the first to pay tuition at the A24 School of Slow Burn Scares. I was never a fan of aughts aggro horror and all its nu metal tinged ignobility, but damned if there's not still something to be said for a flick which never lets its freak flag slip to half-mast. To that end, the production design and lighting in Malignant look fantastic. Between tense, lingering shots of shadowy hallways and cramped rooms, the film's darkness is spruced up with bursts of color. Whether it's the bloody crimson of a giant neon sign, cool blue moonlight bathing a cavernous police bullpen, or the rainbow gleam of the stained glass windows dotting Madison's home. Through it all cuts the gold of the villain's knife, sharpened from a chunk of a broken trophy with more plot significance than one might expect for a slasher's weapon of choice. Behind the camera, Wan tosses in a myriad of technically impressive takes, like an overhead view of Maddie running through her home, ominously evocative of a dollhouse, and a single-shot brawl that harkens back to his Aquaman. The only time anyone's ever thought, man, that Nicole Kidman fight scene was badass. Casting-wise, there's no big names on display, but the screen is never dim for a lack of star power. With her long black hair and heart-stopping wail, leading Lady Wallace looks and sounds every bit the part of a European scream queen. And then there's Gabriel. Between his gnarled visage, glimmering blade, and penchant for communicating exclusively through the nearest speaker system, the character is instantly memorable even aside from his Andrew W.K. meets Mr. X duster and gloves get-up. For reasons that become clear with time, Gabriel also subtly bends and twists in a disorienting fashion as he outruns pursuers, which reminded me of the prehistoric hallucigenia creature and how hard it becomes to tell which way he's facing at any given moment. Likewise, the effects work is solid from start to finish, from an egregiously broken neck to a climatic reveal, which I'll only spoil now enough to say that VFX producer Brian Shows is about 2 letters away from having the perfect name for the job. Indeed, the gore in particular is just the right mix of makeup and digital, and garners appropriate reactions from characters without taking itself too seriously. As soon as someone referred to a police artist's sketch of Gabriel as looking like Sloth from the Goonies, I knew I was in a good place, tonally speaking. Ironically, the least impressive visual of the movie ends up being the centerpiece of its marketing, the morphing transitions that accompany Madison and Gabriel's shared visions. The imagery of the world around her oozing from one location to another is unique and distinctive, but it doesn't apparently correspond to any particular aspect of its eventual justification. Maybe it's a deliberate distraction, but it's nothing that couldn't functionally be accomplished by just having Maddie suddenly perceive herself as standing in another room. Indeed, most of the scenes eventually do that anyway, so we get humble practical trickery resting alongside an extravagant CGI funhouse mirror that just comes off like Wan burning his WB money for the flex of it. The score is on point as well. In addition to standard but solid strings and some synth for good measure, an ominous instrumental cover of the Pixies' Where Is My Mind acts as a fitting fanfare at a couple of key moments. Honoring an alt-rock band is especially appropriate as well, given that the film is set in Seattle. As a Western Washington native, I'm always delighted to see the Emerald City on the silver screen. For better, or well, for Netflix's Death Note. Granted, the film was mostly shot in Cali, and it's by no means indebted to IRL geography. One Kill takes place in the glow of the Silver Cup Studios sign, which is in New York, and like 50 other movies. Still, it's not just B-roll of rainfall and the needle. The Seattle Underground features prominently as well. This not only puts the shadow in foreshadowing, but provides an incomparably eerie setting for some chase sequences. I've toured the place myself, and I can confirm that its cavernous corridors and subterranean storefronts are long overdue for their Hollywood close-up. Now, the film is full of tropes and homages. A desolate medical facility, traumatic childhood memories recovered through hypnosis, thunderbolts and lightning being very, very frightening. A young Madison talking to Gabriel on a toy phone recalls an indelible Twilight Zone episode, and between that dilapidated hospital, mind-bending dream prisons, and that poster, I hope the folks behind The Evil Within at least got a free ticket to opening night. Even within his own filmography, Wan could win an honor from the EPA for his commitment to recycling. This is not his first flick with a red-faced creature that kidnaps a character and binds them in a spooky lair with a grindstone. Nor is it the first where an antagonist with a chip on his shoulder routinely torments victims by muttering through an intercom. Yet Malignant delivers these derivatives with style, gusto, and humor. There's some quick doses of overt comedy, mostly from Madison's sister, who early on enters the ICU dressed as a princess from her shift at a gimmick restaurant, and is later giddily vindicated to learn cops do call in a psychic on some cases. A love-struck CSI gal swooning over the handsome lead investigator on Maddie's case also got a grin or two out of me. But at any given moment, there's a constant low-grade frequency of delectable camp running through the project. The Dutch angles, the rich primary color lighting, the read on lines like, "He's broadcasting his thoughts." Call it corny, call it cheesy, but it sells the mood like nobody's business. Still, not every shot Wan calls here is a bullseye. One actress who plays another's mother looks so much like her that I was briefly confused as to why the characters seem to be in two places at once for a while. The resemblance makes sense from an ancestral perspective. From implicitly about 15 years difference in age between them, not so much. Conversely, it was immediately apparent to me that a photo of a girl taken into evidence was a young Madison, and yet the script plays coy until we see it aged up by a computer. Always such reliable technology in movies. Several scenes of purported VHS tapes from the 80s also aren't terribly convincing. Is it that hard to just find an old Panasonic and splice the footage? So the twist of the movie is that Gabriel is a parasitic twin which manifested as a teratoma on Madison's back, and every kill has been Madison in a fugue state while Gabriel cracks open the back of her skull from within like an automaton and controls her body. The childhood procedure to save her from this odd couple relationship only managed to remove Gabriel's external parts, while his command over her brain was simply subdued along with her memory of everything before the age of 8. When her hubby clocked her, Gabriel put the mad son in Madison, woke back up, and proceeded to go around offing those responsible for trying to kill him, up to and including their birth mother, who abandoned them after believing the conjoined baby was an abomination. The genius of this revelation is twofold. First, it takes the most cliche explanation, the one Maddie is badgered with for the first 2 acts, "It's all in your head," and literalizes it as body horror. Yes, Gabriel is all in her head, and that he is effectively a sentient brain tumor. Movies where the good guy and the bad guy are one and the same, that's a tale as old as Hyde. Movies where the bad guy erupts out of the back of the good guy's skull and goes Ghost Rider on an entire gin pop cell, that's something new. Forget the call is coming from inside your house, the call is coming from between your ears. Second, Malignant drops this on you after you've spent most of the runtime thinking you're in for an entirely different kind of horror story. We were initially led to believe Gabriel is an imaginary friend made manifest, and so I was bracing myself for an R-rated take on Drop Dead Fred a la Daniel Isn't Real. With the protagonist having a psychic link to the killer forged in youth, I went in expecting Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, and I got Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. When Cirque du Soleil's in the off-season, contortionists have been putting bread on the table for years thanks to horror, but this might be the first time such unsettling motions have been employed in service of a literal as well as figurative twist. Yet the film is peppered with hints and background details of where it's headed, which I never got right away but had me eager in hindsight for a repeated viewing. As in Hereditary, a dollhouse prop alludes to a main character being a puppet, and photos of insects which buttress Madison's bathroom mirror serve as an icky clue to a hatching soon to take place. At first blush, then, it's the kind of curtain pull that's a friggin' blast to see unveiled. But on my way back from the theater, my inner cinema sins took on a life of its own and started blaring in my brain. As with the Invisible Man from Wan's partner in crime, Lee Wanell, what we have here is a cool spin on an old school monster that just does not make a lot of sense. Health insurance in America notwithstanding, why wouldn't Madison go see a doctor if her head was bleeding for days on end? Gabe apparently not only studied hand-to-hand combat, but never leaves a single strand of hair behind at any crime scene for DNA sampling. What exactly is happening in that initial scene where a less defined Gabriel knocks Madison around? Is it a fear-mongering first draft as Gabriel workshops his outfit, or some Calvin and Hobbes-esque self-harm to throw audiences off the scent? Why does there seem to be no real-time correspondence between the beginning and end of Madison's visions and how long she's actually on autopilot with Gabriel? Even by its own gonzo logic, the physics of the whole thing strain credulity. Madison says Gabriel makes her stronger, sure, but enough to punch through someone's gut like Omni-Man? To hop down an urban fire escape like Peter Parker on PCP? Does his power extend to being able to bend all of her joints around without discomfort? M. Night Shyamalan similarly gave multiple personality disorder generous leeway over one's muscle mass, but when the split personality is this literal, I have serious questions. If I get a leg cramp at night, I feel it for the rest of the day, so I think Madison would have more pain than just some blood on her pillow after a night of murderous parkour. And I can chalk Gabriel's electricity powers up to some nebulous psychic ability, sure, but what's the deal with all the scenes where it seems like he has invisibility or telekinesis or can teleport? Slashers have always been liberal with killers' mobility and stealthiness for the sake of a good scare, but the Fight Clubbish finale feels like a have your cake and stab it too cop-out, so the mystery of not just if but how Gabriel is supernatural can linger longer. As fleet as Gabriel may be on his feet, or Madison's as the case may be, the emotional arc of the story doesn't quite stick its landing either. Adopted as a child, Maddie laments not having a biological connection, which becomes a real be careful what you wish for situation, but I was a little hazy on the relevant timeline. Why would Madison call Gabriel the devil when her pious mother never raised her beyond birth? I certainly hope the hospital staff wasn't using that word around her. And how didn't her sister know she was adopted? That same sister, by the way, just blurts out that Gabe is responsible for Maddie's miscarriages. That more than anything is somehow the tipping point which gives her the cranial conviction to put him in a melty mind jail of his own. When Madison realizes if he was strong enough to do this, then so am I, it feels like it's in service of a message about self-actualization that hasn't been earned past the heavy topics of child loss and domestic abuse. An odd bookend for the gruesome slapstick that closes us out. Alright, stray thoughts. Gabriel's ability to channel his voice through electronics is a cunning means of misdirection when he calls characters on the phone, but if he really wanted to make Madison's life a living hell, he should have just badgered her with spam. One of Gabriel's earliest visions with which he confounds Madison is making her confuse a pregnant woman with a birthday cake right for the slicing, so as if cribbing from survival horror games isn't enough, we also get an invocation of Portal. With Warner Bros. Doing day and date HBO distribution for its 2021 catalog, it's great that the COVID-averse can catch this picture from home, but man, what a missed opportunity to not have Janus Films put this out instead. I feel like the clock is ticking more than usual on spoilers for this one, because as soon as you see how people are wearing the inevitable Gabriel Halloween masks, the jig is going to be up. Madison's sister visits a decrepit seaside hospital at night, alone, while a killer associated with the location is on the loose, which has gotta be some kind of a win on a bingo card of horror movie don'ts. Between this and Tenet, quarantine is giving us a surprising number of films that try to make walking backwards look intimidating. A warning about the vaccine, perhaps? It's fitting that the film is set in the city that made Nirvana big inasmuch as Madison absorbed Gabriel in utero. The Excellence Knife, as I've come to call it, is an iconic weapon right up there with Jason's machete and Freddy's gloves, but now I can't help but wonder what other awards would make a formidable slot in one's arsenal. I guess you could always strangle someone with your graduation cords. And there's a lot of chair-based violence in that final fight scene. Maybe Gabe's just angry he can't sit down properly? Overall, I'd give this film a 9 out of 10. Given that it's 2/3 well-trod tropes and 1/3 utterly absurd nonsense, I can't in good conscience give it a perfect score, and yet I struggle to share any glaring grievances otherwise. On balance, it's the platonic ideal of a horror movie. Clever, creepy, colorful, and chaotic. As much a throwback to the loud and goofy Turn of the Millennium chillers as to the measured murder mysteries which walked so Michael Myers could stalk. The music, setting, FX work, and suspense all had my eyes glued to the screen and my fingernails embedded in my armrest. In the crowded subgenre of ominous adjective horror, Malignant is not only benign, it's beautiful. If Wan's track record is anything to go by, the flicker of a sequel tease that we get in the final seconds could be the start of a franchise with plenty of growth potential. It's only a one-off though, but I'm ready to say it's a modern classic, and I'm happy to just keep the what-ifs of a Malignant expanded universe in the back of my mind. Now, that being said, Sorry, hold on, I'm getting the call here. Hello?
We've been trying to reach you regarding the college extended warranty.
Ah! I told them to stop calling me.